If you've ever experienced that hazy, innocent kind of love during your teenage years, then this story might hit you harder than you expect. This is a very long story. Probably longer than it needs to be. And honestly, I never asked Xiao if I could tell it. But I still want to share the story of us. Maybe if I finally say it out loud, the memories won't hurt as much anymore. Maybe writing it down is the only way I can find some kind of redemption. I've wanted to tell this story for a very long time. But every time I tried to figure out where to start, my eyes would start filling with tears. Xiao once laughed at me and said, "Your eyes are way too small, they can't hold that many tears." Those were her exact words. Since this is such a long story, I guess the only place to start is the day we first met. Back in the late 1990s, rural northeast China still felt raw and wild. It was real countryside life. Adults worked non-stop during spring and autumn. But winter was different. Winter was slow. People spent their time chatting, playing cards, drinking together, and enjoying the quiet season. That was the world I grew up in. Then in 2001, a new family moved into the empty house across from ours. Uncle Yu. People in the countryside are naturally warm-hearted, so our families quickly became close. The dads drank together and played cards. The moms sat nearby chatting, knitting sweaters and hats for their families. And us kids, we ran through the fields all day long. Life was simple. But it was happy. That same year, I met Xiao. My last name is Mao. Her last name was Yu. That's how we ended up with our nicknames. She was Fish. And I was Cat. Both of us were only children. One day Uncle Yu smiled and told me, "Take a man out to play with you. You're the only kid she knows here." Uncle Yu was originally from Shandong, so his accent was a little different. At first, I didn't even understand what he meant. I just stood there awkwardly. Then my dad explained it to me. "He's asking you to take your little sister out to play." And right after that, he kicked me lightly. That was my punishment for being rude. That year, Xiao was 4 years old. And I was 5. A year passed quietly. Our two families grew even closer. To be honest, we were almost like one big family. Back then, Xiao was still just a little kid. She followed me everywhere. Whenever I went out to play, there would always be a tiny shadow trailing behind me. That shadow was Xiao. She was quiet. Most of the time, she didn't talk much. But she liked staying close to me. If I went to the fields, she would follow. If I climbed a tree, she would stand underneath and watch. If I ran off with the other boys, she would try her best to keep up with us. Sometimes she would fall behind. And when she did, she would just stand there silently, looking at me. So eventually, I got used to waiting for her. At that age, I didn't really understand what friendship meant. I only knew one thing: wherever I went, Xiao would always be there. As we grew older, our world slowly became bigger. We started school. Our village school was small. Very small. There were only a few classrooms, and almost everyone knew each other. Because Xiao was 1 year younger than me, we weren't in the same class. But our classrooms were right next to each other. Every morning, we walked to school together. Every afternoon, we walked home together. Sometimes in winter, the snow in the northeast could be unbelievably deep. The road would be covered in thick white snow. Walking through it was hard. So I would walk in front of her, stepping down the snow to make a path. And she would quietly follow behind me, step by step. Back then, I never thought much about it. To me, Xiao was just the little girl who followed me everywhere. But looking back now, maybe even then, something had already begun. Years passed quietly. Without even realizing it, we were no longer little kids running through the fields. We were growing up. School became harder. Homework became heavier. And slowly, our time to play together became less and less. But one thing never changed. We still walked to school together every day. In the mornings, I would wait outside her house. Sometimes she came out quickly. Sometimes she took forever. And when she finally ran out the door, she would always say the same thing. "Wait for me." Then she would run toward me with her school bag bouncing on her back. By the time we reached middle school, things started to feel different. I couldn't really explain it. But Xiao wasn't the little kid following me anymore. She had grown taller. Her hair was longer. And people started noticing her. Some boys from other classes would talk about her. Sometimes I even heard them say her name. For some reason, that always made me uncomfortable. I didn't understand why. One afternoon after school, we were walking home like usual. The sun was setting, and the road was quiet. Suddenly Xiao asked me something. "Do you think I'm pretty?" I froze for a second. Back then, I had never really thought about that question. To me, she had always just been Xiao. So I shrugged and said, "You're okay, I guess." The moment I said that, she stopped walking. Then she looked at me. "Just okay." I realized something was wrong. But before I could say anything else, she suddenly ran ahead. For the rest of the walk home, she didn't talk to me. At that time, I didn't understand girls at all. But later I would realize something. That simple question she asked that day, was probably the first time. She wanted to know how I really saw her. After that day, things between us felt a little strange. Xiao still walked to school with me. But she talked less than before. Sometimes we would walk the whole road in silence. Back then, I didn't understand what was going on. I just thought, maybe she was in a bad mood. But slowly, I started noticing something else. Some boys had begun paying attention to her. They would try to walk with her after school. Sometimes they would even bring snacks and pretend to offer them casually. I remember one afternoon, a boy from another class walked up to her, right in front of me. He handed her a bottle of milk tea and said, "This is for you." Xiao looked surprised. Then she shook her head and refused. The boy looked a little embarrassed and quickly walked away. But for some reason, that moment made me feel strangely relieved. At the time, I didn't know why. I just felt like something inside my chest suddenly relaxed. But that feeling didn't last long. Because not long after that, I started hearing rumors. People in school were saying, "Someone liked Xiao." Some said it was a boy from the next class. Some said he had already confessed to her. I tried to act like I didn't care. But every time I heard those rumors, I couldn't stop thinking about them. One evening on the way home, I finally asked her, "Is it true?" She looked confused. "Is what true?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I said, "People say someone confessed to you." For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she suddenly smiled. and asked me something instead. Why? Are you jealous? That question caught me completely off guard. I quickly shook my head. No. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure if it was the truth. After she asked that question, "Are you jealous?" I didn't know how to answer. So I just looked away and kept walking. Xiao didn't push the question further. She simply laughed softly and walked beside me like nothing had happened. But something inside me had already changed. For the first time, I started paying attention to her in a different way. I noticed how her hair moved when the wind blew. I noticed the way she laughed when something was funny. And sometimes, when she talked to other boys, I felt strangely uncomfortable. At first, I told myself it was nothing. I thought maybe I was just being protective. After all, we had grown up together. But the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it kept getting stronger. Then one day, something happened that I still remember clearly even now. It was during the winter. School had just ended for the day. Snow was falling lightly from the sky. The entire road home was covered in white. We were walking side by side, our footsteps leaving marks in the snow. Suddenly Xiao stopped walking. I turned around and looked at her. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the snow for a moment. Then she looked up at me and asked quietly, "Do you think we'll always stay like this?" I didn't understand the question. Like what? She pointed at the 2 rows of footprints in the snow. Walking home together. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. So I answered the only way I could. "Of course. We've always walked home together." She didn't say anything after that. She just smiled slightly. Then we kept walking, but years later, I would realize something. That simple moment in the snow was probably the first time Xiao was trying to ask me about our future. As time went on, our final year of middle school arrived. Everyone started talking about the same thing. Exams, high school, and the future. Teachers constantly reminded us how important the upcoming exams were. Parents talked about nothing else at home. The pressure was everywhere. Because of that, Xiao and I spent even less time together. We still walked to school together sometimes. But most of the time, we were both buried in homework and preparation. One evening after school, I stayed late to finish an assignment. By the time I finally left the classroom, the sky was already dark. When I walked out of the school gate, I saw someone standing there. It was Xiao. She was leaning against the wall, quietly waiting. The cold wind blew through the street. Her hands were tucked inside her sleeves. I walked up to her, surprised. "Why are you still here?" She looked at me like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I was waiting for you." That simple sentence hit me harder than I expected. I frowned slightly. "You didn't have to wait. You could have gone home first." She shook her head. "Then you would have to walk home alone." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The street was quiet. Only the sound of the wind and our footsteps in the snow. Then suddenly, Xiao stopped walking. I turned around. Before I could ask what was wrong, she suddenly spoke. "Hey. If one day, we don't end up going to the same school, what will you do?" I didn't think much about the question. So I answered honestly. Then we'll just meet during holidays. That's not a big deal. But Xiao didn't smile this time. She looked at me seriously and said something I will never forget. I don't want to only see you during holidays. At that moment, I finally realized something. Maybe the feelings between us were no longer just friendship. After that conversation, something between us felt different. It wasn't obvious. Nothing dramatic happened. But the air between us felt heavier somehow. We still walked to school together sometimes. We still talked like before. But every now and then, our eyes would meet. And both of us would quickly look away. It was strange. The exams were getting closer. Everyone in school was stressed. Teachers were stricter. Homework was endless. But strangely enough, those quiet walks with Xiao became the calmest moments of my day. One afternoon after class, we were sitting on the school steps. The sun was setting slowly behind the buildings. Most of the other students had already left. Xiao suddenly asked me, "Do you remember when we first met?" I laughed. "Of course. You were the little kid who followed me everywhere." She frowned slightly. "I did not follow you everywhere." "Yes, you did. You even cried when you couldn't keep up." She immediately protested, "That only happened once." We both started laughing. For a moment, it felt like we were kids again. Then the laughter slowly faded. The evening wind moved softly through the empty schoolyard. Xiao looked at the ground and quietly drew circles with the tip of her shoe. After a long pause, she spoke again. "Hey. What if one day we don't see each other anymore?" The question caught me off guard. Why would that happen? She shrugged slightly. People grow up. People move away. People change schools. Life changes. I didn't like the way she said those words. So I answered immediately. "That won't happen." She looked up at me. "Why not?" I hesitated for a second. Then I said the first thing that came to mind. "Because we've always been together." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then slowly, she smiled. But this time, there was something different in her eyes. Something deeper. Something I didn't fully understand yet. But looking back now, that moment was probably the last quiet moment we had before everything changed. The closer the exams got, the busier everyone became. Students stayed later at school. Teachers gave more assignments. The entire class felt tense all the time. Because of that, Xiao and I barely talked during the day anymore. But something strange happened. Even though we talked less, I started thinking about her more. Sometimes during class, I would suddenly remember something she said. Sometimes while doing homework, I would catch myself wondering what she was doing. It felt unfamiliar. One evening after school, I was walking home alone. Xiao had left earlier that day. The sky was already turning dark. The road through the village was quiet as usual. When I passed by the small field near our houses, I suddenly saw someone sitting there. It was Xiao. She was sitting on a low stone wall, looking at the sunset. I walked over. "What are you doing here?" She looked a little surprised to see me. "Oh, you're done with school." I nodded. "Yeah." For a moment we just stood there. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple. The wind was cold. Finally, she spoke. "Hey. Can I ask you something?" I shrugged. Sure. She looked at me very seriously. Then she asked, do you like anyone? The question came out of nowhere. For a second, my mind went completely blank. Why are you asking that? She didn't answer right away. She simply said, just answer the question. I thought about it for a moment. Then I shook my head. No. She stared at me for a few seconds. Then she asked another question. Not even a little. I laughed awkwardly. No. For some reason, the moment I said that, her expression changed. She looked relieved, but also a little nervous. Then suddenly, she stood up, took a deep breath, and said something that changed everything. Then, do you want to try liking me? At that moment, my brain completely stopped working. When Xiao said that, my brain completely froze. Do you want to try liking me? The words echoed in my head. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say. I just stood there staring at her. The wind moved softly through the field. The sky behind her was slowly turning dark. And Xiao looked more nervous than I had ever seen her before. She avoided my eyes and stared down at the ground. Then she said quietly, if you don't want to, you can just pretend I didn't say anything. That sentence finally pulled me back to reality. I shook my head quickly. No, that's not it. She looked up again. Then what? I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. Because the truth was, I had never thought about it before. To me, Xiao had always just been Xiao. The girl who grew up next door. The girl who followed me everywhere when we were kids. The girl who walked home with me every single day. But at that moment, when she stood in front of me like that, I suddenly realized something. I didn't want to imagine my life without her in it. The thought of that felt strangely uncomfortable. So finally, I took a deep breath and answered her. Okay. For a moment, Xiao didn't react. It was like she hadn't heard me clearly. Okay. She repeated. I nodded. Yeah. Let's try it. The moment those words left my mouth, Xiao's face slowly broke into a smile. A real smile. The kind of smile I had never seen before. At that moment, neither of us realized it. But that simple decision was about to change everything in our lives. After that day, things between us changed. But strangely enough, not in the way people might expect. There was no dramatic moment. No big celebration. No official first date. Life simply continued. The only difference was that now, when we walked home together, there was a quiet understanding between us. Sometimes we talked about school. Sometimes we talked about the future. And sometimes, we didn't talk at all. But even in silence, it felt comfortable. For the first few days, we didn't even tell anyone. Not our friends. Not our families. It was like a small secret that only belonged to the two of us. One afternoon after school, we were walking through the familiar road back to the village. The sky was bright, and the wind carried the smell of the fields. Xiao was talking about something that happened in class. But I wasn't really listening. Because for the first time, I noticed how close we were walking. Our shoulders were almost touching. And suddenly, Xiao reached out her hand. Not suddenly enough to feel dramatic. Just naturally. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her fingers gently grabbed mine. For a moment, I froze. My heart started beating much faster than usual. Xiao noticed immediately. She laughed softly. "Why are you so nervous?" I tried to sound calm. "I'm not nervous." But that only made her laugh even more. "Your hand is shaking." I looked down at our hands and realized she was right, but strangely, I didn't want to let go. So we kept walking like that, hand in hand, all the way back home. At that moment, I didn't realize it, but that quiet walk became one of the happiest memories of my life. After we started dating, life didn't suddenly become dramatic. There were no grand gestures, no movie-like romance. Instead, everything felt simple. But somehow, that simplicity made every small moment feel special. We still walked to school together every morning. But now, when we met at the corner of the road, Xiao would smile in a slightly different way. A little softer. A little shy. Sometimes she would ask random questions. "Did you finish your homework? Did you study for tomorrow's test?" And sometimes, she would just look at me for a moment, then quickly look away. At school, we tried to act normal. Back then, in our small village school, dating wasn't exactly encouraged. Teachers would scold students if they found out. So most of the time, we kept our distance in public. We sat in different classrooms, talked to different friends, pretended like nothing had changed. But after school, everything went back to normal. Those quiet walks home became the best part of every day. Sometimes we talked about our dreams. Sometimes we complained about school. And sometimes we just walked silently, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the fields. One evening, as we were walking home, Xiao suddenly asked me something. "Do you think we'll still be together in the future?" The question felt heavier than it sounded. I didn't hesitate. "Of course." She looked at me carefully. "Really?" I nodded. "We've known each other our whole lives. Why wouldn't we be?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the road ahead of us. Then she quietly said something. "I hope you're right." At the time, I didn't understand why she said it like that. But years later, I would realize something. Sometimes, people ask questions about the future because they're already afraid of losing it. As time passed, our final exams grew closer and closer. The entire school felt different. Students were quieter. Teachers were stricter. Everyone was thinking about the same thing: the future. For the first time in our lives, we had to start thinking about where we would go next. High school. And maybe even life beyond the village. One afternoon after school, Xiao and I were walking home like usual. The wind was warm. Spring was finally arriving. As we walked along the familiar road, Xiao suddenly spoke. "My parents have been talking about moving." I stopped walking. "Moving?" She nodded slowly. "They think the city will have better schools." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The idea had never crossed my mind before. To me, our village had always felt permanent. Our houses, the road we walked every day, the fields where we played as kids. Everything felt like it would always stay the same. But suddenly, that certainty disappeared. When I finally asked, "They're still deciding," she replied quietly. "But it might be after the exams." We continued walking. But this time, The road felt longer than usual. After a while, Xiao said something softly. "If I move away, will you forget about me?" I immediately shook my head. "Of course not. How could I?" She looked at me carefully. "People say long-distance relationships never work." I forced a small smile. "Then we'll prove them wrong." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she slowly nodded. But even back then, something in her eyes told me she wasn't completely convinced. After Xiao told me about the possible move, everything started to feel different. The exams were approaching fast. Everyone around us was busy studying. But in the back of my mind, there was only one question. What if she really left at first? I tried not to think about it. I told myself it was only a possibility. Maybe her parents would change their minds. Maybe they would decide to stay. But deep down, I knew things were already changing. One evening after school, we were walking home again. The sky was slowly turning orange as the sun began to set. Xiao was quieter than usual. After a while, she finally spoke. "My parents went to look at schools in the city today." My heart sank. And I asked carefully. "They liked it?" That short sentence felt heavier than anything else she could have said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The road in front of us suddenly felt longer than ever. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding. "So, does that mean you're really moving?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the fields beside the road. Then she nodded. "Probably." The word echoed in my mind. Probably. Not certain. But close enough. I tried to sound calm. "When would you leave?" "After the exams," she said quietly. We kept walking. But neither of us knew what to say anymore. Finally, Xiao stopped walking. I turned around to face her. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. A mixture of sadness, and something else. Then she said something softly. "Maybe, this is how growing up works." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. But later I would realize something. Growing up often means learning that some things don't stay the same forever. After that day, the idea of Xiao leaving stayed in my mind constantly. Even when we were studying in class, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Everything suddenly felt temporary. The classroom. The road we walked every day. Even the small village we had grown up in. It was like the world I knew was slowly preparing to change. But strangely enough, Xiao didn't talk about the move very often. Instead, she acted almost the same as before. We still walked home together. Still talked about school. Still laughed about small things. But sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I would catch her staring at the road ahead, like she was already imagining a life somewhere else. One evening, we decided to take a longer path home. Instead of the usual road, we walked through the old field path we used to play in as kids. The sky was slowly turning dark. The wind moved quietly through the tall grass. When we reached the small hill near the field, Xiao suddenly sat down. I sat beside her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she suddenly asked something. "Do you remember when we were little?" "Of course," I said. "You used to cry whenever you fell down." She laughed softly. "That only happened a few times." Then she looked out across the fields. This place feels smaller now. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe we just got bigger. She nodded slowly. Maybe. After a short silence, she said something else. Sometimes I wish time could just stop. I looked at her. Why? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the fading sunset. Then she finally said, because if time stopped, we wouldn't have to say goodbye. At that moment, I realized something. No matter how much we pretended things were normal, both of us already knew what was coming. The final exams arrived faster than either of us expected. For weeks, the entire school had been preparing for them. Teachers kept reminding us how important they were. Students stayed late in classrooms, reviewing notes, and solving practice problems. But for me, it was hard to focus. Every time I tried to study, one thought kept returning. Soon, Xiao might leave. The exams lasted several days. Each morning, students gathered nervously in the schoolyard. Everyone looked tense. Some were quietly reviewing textbooks. Others were whispering last-minute questions to friends. Xiao and I didn't talk much during those days. Not because we didn't want to, but because every conversation felt like it carried too much weight. Instead, we just exchanged small smiles. Simple things like, good luck, or, see you after the test. When the final exam finally ended, the entire school suddenly relaxed. Students ran out of classrooms laughing. Some were shouting with excitement. Others were already making plans for the upcoming summer break. But for me, the relief didn't last very long. Because now, the thing we had been avoiding was finally here. The waiting. A few days later, Xiao asked if we could meet after school. When I arrived at the small road near her house, she was already there. Standing quietly under the big tree we often met at. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a slow breath. My parents made the final decision. My chest tightened immediately. We're moving to the city. The words hung in the air. Even though I had expected them, hearing them out loud still felt different. When I asked, she looked down for a moment. Next week. The answer came so quickly that my mind almost couldn't process it. Next week. Just a few days. For a long time, we stood there in silence. Then Xiao said something softly. I wanted to tell you myself. At that moment, I realized something. The time we had left together was much shorter than I ever imagined. After Xiao told me they were leaving next week, everything suddenly felt unreal. Just a few days. That was all the time we had left. For years, we had walked the same road together every day. And now, it was about to end. During the next few days, we spent almost every afternoon together. Not because we planned it, but because neither of us wanted to waste any time. Sometimes we walked through the village. Sometimes we sat near the small field outside town. And sometimes we simply walked the same road we had taken to school since we were kids. But strangely enough, we didn't talk about the future very much. Instead, we talked about the past. We remembered the games we used to play as children. The times we got into trouble at school. The silly arguments we had when we were younger. Each memory felt more important than it ever had before. One evening, we walked to the small hill near the fields again. The same place where we had talked a few days earlier. The sky was clear. The sunset painted the entire horizon orange and pink. Xiao sat down in the grass. I sat beside her. For a while, we watched the sunset quietly. Then she suddenly said something. Do you think people really remember their childhood forever? I thought about it for a moment. Maybe not everything. But the important moments, probably. She nodded slowly. I hope so. I looked at her. Why? She smiled softly. Because I don't want to forget this place. She paused for a moment. Or you. The words were simple. But hearing them made my chest feel heavy. After a short silence, I finally asked something. When you move to the city, will you still visit? She looked at the fading sunset. Then she answered quietly. I'll try. But something about the way she said it made me realize something. Sometimes when people say, I'll try, what they really mean is, I don't know if I can. The day before Xiao left arrived faster than I expected. It was a quiet afternoon. The sky was gray, and the air felt unusually still. I was sitting at home when Xiao suddenly sent me a message. Can you come out for a while? I didn't hesitate. A few minutes later, I was already walking toward the small road near her house. When I arrived, I saw her standing there. Next to her were several cardboard boxes. Her family had already started packing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Everything suddenly felt very real. So, tomorrow, I asked quietly. She nodded. Early in the morning. The words hung in the air. Tomorrow morning. That meant this was our last evening together. We started walking again. Not toward the fields this time. Instead, we walked through the village. Past the small store where we used to buy snacks after school. Past the playground where we spent countless afternoons as kids. Past the school gate we had walked through every morning. Every place felt different now. Like we were saying goodbye to all of them. After a while, we reached the small hill one last time. The wind was stronger today. The grass moved quietly in the evening breeze. Xiao sat down. I sat beside her. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she broke the silence. Do you think we'll see each other again? I answered immediately. Of course. But this time, even I wasn't completely sure. She smiled faintly. You always say that. I didn't know how to respond. After a moment, she reached into her pocket. Then she handed me something. It was a small bracelet. I made it a few days ago, she said. Just something simple. I looked at it carefully. The threads were slightly uneven. But somehow, that made it feel even more special. Keep it, she said. So you won't forget me. I looked at her. I could never forget you. For a long moment, neither of us spoke again. The sun slowly disappeared below the horizon. And without realizing it, the last evening we had together was quietly coming to an end. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still pale, and the village was quiet. For a moment, I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Because I knew something. Today, Xiao would leave. After getting dressed, I walked toward her house. The road felt strangely empty. When I arrived, a small truck was already parked outside. Several boxes were loaded in the back. Xiao's parents were talking with the driver. And Xiao was standing beside the truck. When she saw me, She gave a small smile. You came. Of course, I replied. For a few minutes, we just stood there quietly. Neither of us really knew what to say. Finally, her parents finished loading the last box. Her father called out, "Xiao, it's time to go." She nodded. Then she turned back to me. For a moment, it felt like time slowed down. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "You too," I replied. She hesitated for a second. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. It was the first time we had ever hugged like that. Neither of us spoke. But somehow, that silence said everything. After a moment, she stepped back. Then she climbed into the truck. The engine started. Slowly, the truck began to move. I stood there on the road, watching it disappear into the distance. And just like that, a part of my childhood left with it. Years have passed since that day. Life moved forward. I finished school, met new people, went to new places. But sometimes, when I see a quiet sunset, or walk down a familiar road, I still remember those days. The small village, the long walks home, and the girl who once held my hand on that dusty road. I don't know where Xiao is now. Maybe she built a completely different life in the city. Maybe she forgot about the village. Or maybe, sometimes she remembers too. But one thing I know for sure is this: some people only stay in your life for a short time. But the memories they leave behind can last forever.